Greetings, nerds. This is SNN Nerd. I'm your host, Sarah Belmont, and with me, as always, is our Mr. Producer, Will Polk. How are you doing tonight, Will?
Doing very well, Sarah. Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday to you, too. How are you
Yeah,
feeling?
I'm doing well. Doing well. Had a good weekend. Saw one of the things. Well, saw both the things we're going to talk about tonight, and I'm still just processing it. But yeah, had a good weekend. Very actually, I joked on Twitter today that I was like, "What's this substance falling out of the sky?" Oh, it's rain. We have it hasn't rained here in forever, so it was like, huh, that's what it looks like.
Wow. And yet I get it every other day, if not every day. But yeah, I'm going through my post-traumatic Joker experience myself. Uh, it's an experience, that's for sure.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So both of us saw the movie last night, and it was really weird. And this is a spoiler review, so we're just gonna start jumping into it. Joker dies. No, can you
He dies a
imagine?
horrible, horrible death.
He dies like any good villain dies,
Yeah,
except there's no hero. Um,
they didn't find the
no,
body.
of course not. He falls out of the window, and then they just fade to black.
Exactly.
So we don't know if he lives or dies because it's Joker. No, I went with two people who are who see some of these movies but don't really understand all of the Easter eggs or all of the significance. So very for people who just go to the movies for the sake of going to the movies. And when we got into the car, everyone was unanimous and just feeling like, well, now I feel like shit. That was that was heavy. And yet we started laughing afterwards.
Imagine
Like
that.
it was, yeah, it's just this weird thing that occurs where you walking away from that film, you're thinking in your mind, well, A, what the heck?
Mm,
B, oh my God. And then you just start laughing about it. And I think that just shows how well done this movie is from
yeah,
start to finish,
yeah,
that it manages to cause that reaction that is so significant in terms of the story that they're trying to tell.
yeah. I completely agree. One of the when I first a couple things. One, the trailer really does not give hardly anything away about this movie. I mean, it does tell you. I mean, it gives somebody the Arthur Fleck. There's a bunch of still images, and you see all those images pop up in the film. But the film itself, I really didn't know what to expect going in, because of course there was all the over the last few weeks, all the warnings. I mean, the military was like have warnings about people seeing this, and all the media as far as like even when I walked into the theater, it's like getting my ticket. It had the little disclaimer, Joker is a comic book film, but it does have violent images and blah 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 blah, all the disclaimers.
Hmm.
But once I started watching it, my I will say my reaction at the end was, why the hell are people so like freaked out about it? It was clear it was one of those forbidden fruit narrative feeding on itself as far as wanting to scare people about this film, because quite frankly Arthur Fleck was not a character that would inspire you to do anything compared
Right.
with, especially when you compare when I think about the Heath Ledger version of the Joker, who was a very competent diabolical genius, whereas you have this Arthur Fleck who was just, I mean, the guy was a straight up loser. He couldn't hold a job. He couldn't.
Ouch.
I mean, how anybody who has seen this film? I know I'm jumping into like the conclusion before we really get into some
No, that's
analysis,
fine.
but I just want to address this right off the top, because I just felt that was one of the big takeaways I got away from this film, is all of the just shit that was like,
Nonsense.
that was
Yeah.
said about it beforehand, and I think it's just it was completely overblown.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
and so I just wanted to just address that right out the top about that character, about my feelings on that particular point. But as far as the character,
Wait. I want to respond to what you just
yeah,
said first,
yeah,
because it's important. I mean, a lot of people are talking about it, especially going in. There was so much noise, and coming out, you're suddenly thinking, "What? Why? What was the big deal?"
yeah,
And honestly, here's my conspiracy theory. I think that the people who started to plant those seeds saw this movie and they were thinking in their minds, wow, that movie managed to strike this level of tension, this level of foreboding and diabolicalness with almost subtlety,
yeah,
dare I say.
hmm
And just a character study and just human nature
yeah,
without not a lot. Yeah, there's a few scenes which is like really violent, but I've seen worse. Like
I have
watch
to.
a season of Punisher, that's way worse.
Yeah, yeah,
Season of
totally.
Hannibal, way
Yeah,
worse.
way worse.
Yeah, so but this movie I think is just more that disturbing factor that and these people are the same people who I think are behind movies that do in fact glorify the action and violence and gore of it all, because that's the only way they know how to tell that story. They don't know how to tell the story the way Todd Phillips did.
Yeah,
Gets to the similar points across, but does not glorify it, because you're absolutely right. Like Arthur Fleck is a loser, and this world almost creates what he becomes.
hmm
And I mean, it's not mother nature versus nurture,
no,
because part of why how he gets on this path is from his upbringing, but it's just this whole perfect storm of events that really allows him to transcend into that other character and find balance. And I think it is a scary thought to a degree, because
hmm
there are people in the world with mental illness, and seeing this and seeing how we could encourage that to create our own jokers of the world,
yeah,
that is horrifying and that is scary, but it does not glorify it.
no, not at all, not at all. And I'm glad, and that's one of the things too that was so. There's a lot of this film is really a mirror in some ways on our society at this time, and I think that is part of why it's so. It does push buttons. It really does push buttons. I mean, I mean, there were people who actually left the theater uh, that was sitting beside me. I don't know if they were thinking that they were going to go in and it was going to be like Suicide Squad or the Marvel movie type comic book movie or whatever, but they were like they cashed out. They were like about halfway through. It was too much for them. They left.
Was it during one of the probably dozen scenes where it's Joaquin dancing around in his underwear?
No, no, it wasn't.
Okay.
And it
Because
wasn't.
there
Yeah,
were some times when I wanted to leave during those.
yeah.
Like, what the heck
No,
is this?
no, it was actually the scene where he was with the social worker and they talked about cutting his funding for the program,
Hmm. Hmm.
which gets to my point as far as why again it's like this film really touches on a lot of just societal. I mean, it holds a mirror up to society as far as what we hold important, and you know, in a very both overt and also subversive way, as in pointing out things. And I think that's part of, as I said, one of the reasons why it is so controversial and hard film to watch, because you're right as far it there are people who are out there with issues who, as Arthur even said in the film, I talk, but no one's listening. You're
Mhm.
not listening to me.
Mhm.
And when we see events, I mean, not to get all political or bring in real world, but I mean, it is very topical with this film. you know, when you hear about situations where there's been mass shootings or things like that, what's the one thing you hear about people say about those individuals who do it? I missed it. Oh, he didn't seem wrong. He didn't seem normal, different, or he was just kind of strange or kind of weird, but I didn't see anything harmful about him. And I mean, and that was kind of like Arthur. I mean, yeah, he was weird. He, his coworkers poked fun at him and stuff, and he was really just the kind of guy who just kind of just blended in. Who was, you would see him on the street and you realize that, oh yeah, there's something not right about him. But we just, he's just an individual that, quite frankly, was ignored and just kind of blended in and just kind of just shuffled along in the system, and because of it, he didn't get the help that he needed, and we saw what happened.
Right. I mean, essentially he was faking happiness, and that's how he managed to get by, and that's what I really think is intriguing about this portrait of who the Joker is that at the end of the day he's depressed, and depressed is really hard to figure out if a person is clinically depressed or if they're just having a bad day, a bad month, a bad year. Go figure. I mean, but for Arthur, he's been depressed his entire life because he's had a lot of trauma, and he hasn't had the services to reconcile that. He hasn't been around good influences. His mom, and I love how they put this: delusions of grandeur.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And to a depressed person, happiness is the biggest delusion of all.
Yeah.
And I love that. I think there's something so real and authentic about that concept, because we all, I think, at times have to fake our own happiness, and there's such, and it's such disingenuous. It doesn't make you feel good, and it actually makes you feel worse because you're just a faker, and you're waiting for somebody to see that so that you can be like, yes, I feel this way too. And ironically, when he starts doing really bad things, that's when he starts to feel connected.
Yeah.
And what you brought up also makes me think about the other side of this that I think is so, like, not the political stuff, but the artistic, what Todd Phillip does as just a plain director and setting tone, and the dramedy. This is a quintessential dramedy. Like 10 years from now, they're going to be showing this movie in film school, because that scene where he first encounters the cops, gets up off the bench and walks straight into the door.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody laughs. But what was really interesting is after the laugh, you also see him standing there and waving his hand. Mm-hmm. And remember, this is the same character who said, like, just moments before, or a few scenes before that, I don't even know if I exist.
Right.
And that's like, so the way Todd incorporates comedic elements, mm-hmm. which is really just dramatic irony.
It is. Yeah.
Like, okay, my favorite scene in the entire movie, or maybe, but it's just because you're right to an extent about the trailers not giving too much away. Trailers give away, in my opinion, a fair amount, but the scene that is preserved is the scene where he kills the other clown person, and then the midget is scared for his life.
Yep.
And so are we. And that scene is so perfect.
It is.
Because it's violent, it's bloody, it is terrifying, and then there's this calmness, and suddenly it's just him and his only friend, arguably, or whoever was nice to him, and we're all thinking in our minds, well, he's obviously going to kill him, and then he gets to the door and everybody laughs when he can't reach the lock.
He can't reach the lock. Yep.
Well, like, what does that say about us? We literally 2 minutes before watched him
Yeah,
beat this other man's brains out,
yeah,
and then the moment the midget can't reach the door or the lock, we laugh.
we laugh. Yeah, and that's the genius of this film.
Uh-huh.
I mean, as I said before, it really does hold up the mirror to us, and that's why it's so uncomfortable, because it does expose the duality. I don't know if duality is the right word, but just you're right. I mean that in the frame of in a span of 1 to 2 minutes, we went from like just shocked shitless
Uh-huh. Yep.
to just like people laughing their ass off in the theater because the little guy couldn't like reach the lock. And
Yeah, and then
yeah,
he gets away, and
and
we're
he
like,
gets away.
"Oh, that's good."
That's good,
But
yeah.
somebody
And
still died.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. So it's just like it's like the desensitization of violent acts,
Mm,
how we've kind of almost gotten normalized to these things, and we just move on to it really is like something happens in the news, we all do thoughts and prayers, and then we move on to the next thing. Oh,
right.
what's Kourtney Kardashian doing today? You know, it's just like, you know, it's that's what's so one of the things I thought Phillips and Joaquin did so well in this film is taking you through those emotions, because whenever from the very beginning of the film when Arthur was beat up by the thugs when they stole his son, and getting just getting the shit kicked out of him in the street,
Hmm.
you know, it was just that I you know, the emotion I felt there was just total sympathy for this guy. And
Mm,
well, because it it set the tone perfectly, because it was right at the beginning of the film. I mean, I've seen the stuff in the trailer before, but that's what I meant by it. The trailer not giving everything away,
right.
because I thought maybe this, you know, could easily have been somewhere further down in the story, but here at the very beginning, we I think it set the tone as far as like showing how downtrodden this guy is, and so you do feel some empathy for the guy, because he's just trying to do his job, and these young punks just come and just like ruin his day.
Because of the trailer, I felt more empathy for him when he was told you have to get the sign back.
Hmm. And that's
And
another
then
point. Yeah,
and then he goes into the alley and he starts like just inflicting self-harm.
yeah,
In that moment, I felt empathy. And then one of my it was weird because going into it, I felt like there was an expectation set where I would consistently throughout the movie feel empathy for him,
hmm,
which actually I would argue I didn't. Like just those few scenes,
hmm,
maybe,
yeah,
but overall, I knew like he was crazy, and I was just trying to follow his
right,
lead in a way. I was trying to be like, okay, well, what's going on? And then
right,
the twists started coming, which really were engaging because the moment those other pieces started to fall in place, you're just like, okay, now
yeah,
everything I watched before makes a little bit sense. I definitely have questions, but suddenly this movie just upped its game,
hmm,
and again and again and again.
yeah,
Did you notice in that first scene when they beat him up in the alley, they focus in on him. He has a flower in his jacket
yep,
that is one of the gag flowers. So he makes it spray the water.
hmm,
Okay, I did not notice, and then I watched the scene dissection with Todd Phillips, who talked about it, and I was like, oh, see, another thing. There are probably so many other small details like that that I probably missed the first time around.
yeah.
The hard thing is, this isn't really a movie I want to see again.
I was just thinking the same thing. Even last night when I was leaving the theater, I was just like, that film was almost sheer genius. I don't know if I want to watch it again.
No.
I just feel like it's one of those films like I just want to let it just sit and just I just ponder over what I remember from it, and never see it again, because I don't feel like I will get the same emotional experience out of it, or Yeah, I mean, like you said, I'll pick up other little details, but that the visceral feelings that I have. I mean, even talking about it with you tonight, it's, as I was saying before, the empathy, but the other genius about this film is how utterly repulsed I was about this character. Even
Ooh,
even
interesting.
even how, and from the span, I mean, in the span of just like feeling really bad for the guy because he just got the shit kicked out of him, and then also having to go back and get the sign, because that was another place where I did feel like the same like you, felt bad for him. But then he would just do the things that that we could see in his descent into madness. And unless one, we can't go without talking about how he stalked and had these fantasies and delusions about his neighbor.
Yeah, but wait a second, because I think so. This is crazy because you're saying initially you felt empathy, and then as it went on, you grew to repulse Arthur, which is a very different experience than I had, because I maybe had one moment of empathy, but I was always like one eye open because we know who this character is, and honestly, I don't know if I was repulsed. Like, it was shocking, and some of those moments, especially with that one guy, like that blood, but they did it in a way that really also made you say, like, if I was Arthur, I would have probably done the same thing.
Right, and that's what I mean by, and it's not so much the violent acts as much as the descent into madness that was so off, that just really got me like, oh God, this guy, I just can't with him.
What was it, a descent into madness? I keep hearing that phrase, yet one of the first scenes after the opening where he is talking to a therapist, court ordered, because he was already locked up.
Yeah.
So if he was already locked up, then he's already gone crazy.
Yeah, he was, but I think it's the I mean, he was already mentally ill. He suffered child abuse. I mean, his mother tried to burn him up. So I mean, there are those elements of it that the seeds are already there, and the conditions was already there. But one, he was getting treatment. I mean, he even saw that he knew on an intuitive level that he was a danger not only to himself and to others. So that was why he wanted to make sure he had his meds. So I mean, he was consciously aware of his situation.
Yeah.
So I
and
think,
it was the delusion of grandeurs that really did him in.
Yeah. And so the more delusional he got, I mean, it was just, the first time, I think the one scene where he follows Sophie to the bank, and then later in the day they encounter each other and they talk, and he talks about being a comedian and everything, and of course he goes to the show and he performs and she's there. Well, actually before that, does he imagine? I'm trying to remember, what was the sequence? Did he imagine going into her apartment before the comedy show, or was it after?
Oh, it was after.
It was after, yeah.
Because it was even after his mom had her stroke.
Right.
And she's at the hospital with him, and you, as a viewer, you are totally fooled because you're thinking, oh, this is kind of unrealistic because, I mean, that's Zazie Beetz and she's beautiful. What the heck is she doing with him? But for whatever reason, he convinces her that he's a good person, or she sees something in him. Very, very innocent. And then that scene where he goes into the apartment, and the way they shoot it, you already know. Like, you're you're scared,
Hmm.
and that's really what I think is genius. And no, I wasn't repulsed by his actions, but I don't know if I could sit through this movie again just because of the tension.
Yeah.
There, you are so engrossed and
Hmm.
just fearful for anything to happen, because it's almost like at the beginning of the movie, he strikes a match and you're just waiting for something to blow up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just continues, and even when there are explosions, the match is relit and you're just like, okay,
Yeah.
another one.
Another
Like
one.
it
Yeah.
just continues. There's this dread. And something that I heard in a review this morning that I thought was fascinating observation is that arguably this movie is not dark,
No.
because a lot of the scenes are actually shot in the daytime.
Hmm.
It's just bleak.
It's just a bleak. Yeah. Yeah. It's just very bleak. I mean, when speaking of the bleakness and tone, I think obviously a lot of folks have compared it to Taxi Driver, and what else? The Kings of New York, or I think another
King of comedy.
King of Comedy. Yeah, I always think Kings of Comedy with Cedric the Entertainer and those folks.
Mhm.
But yeah, the original Kings of Comedy. Um, but the film that that thing that I thought of whenever I was sitting there watching it, I was thinking more of like Network and even All the President's Men,
Mm.
because you had the classic Warner Brothers logo. I thought of Network in particular when I saw Robert De Niro's character and just the whole um, television and how his Murray just basically was a part of this you know world. And it did have that kind of like late 70s. It did. I mean, obviously it was set in the late 70s, early 80s, so it clearly had that feel. But
And that scene where he envisions what it would be like to be in the studio audience,
mhm,
that was our first hint that
yep,
this whole the delusions, and yet for some reason we're just like, oh, that's a daydream. Okay, that
mhm,
it's not going to mean anything,
right,
or it's setting up that fantasy world. But like it just, I just wanted to bring that up, that
yeah,
we were totally told what was going to happen,
we
and yet it
were.
still caught us off guard.
It did. I mean, it was just think. Given that I watched a film in the same week, we had so many. You had Martin Scorsese and Jennifer Aniston talking about cinema and the MCU and comic book films, or basically uh, just the theme park versus cinema. I mean, one, Scorsese would love this film, but two, it it's basically taking a comic book character and name and the last 20 the last act of the film finally like giving us the reveal of the character who we are we are familiar with because of what we've seen in other media. But I mean, this film to me was it truly was just a genius filmmaking, and some of the things you talked about, the tension building up, and how that dream sequence at the very beginning, it did telegraph where we were going on this journey. But Todd Phillips, just in the way that he shot this film and the way that they just sort of built each block, from the scene with in the daydreaming in the studio with where he's sitting there with his mother, to the
Hmm.
first act, the first time he actually does kill with the three yuppies um,
The
on the
subway. Yeah.
subway, and and then it just builds on itself in each individual moment. When I say repulse, it's just more the the actions that he engages
Hmm.
in is just sort of like, and it's that tension, and not the revulsion of like just feeling physically ill, but just the emotional roller coaster that this put me on, because each time they ratcheted it up, and I was just like totally along for the ride. But by the end of it, I was just emotionally spent.
Yeah, yeah. I kept, for some reason, well, I know why, but I keep comparing it to Mr. Robot
Mm,
season 1.
hmm
It's very similar. You're dealing with two unreliable narrators. You're
hmm
dealing with people who think that they're the heroes of the story that they're telling because they're telling it, which, by the way, something that nobody's talking about is the fact that I'm pretty sure, I'm like almost positive, Joaquin is in every single scene.
Yes.
So, and that's a rarity in a
hmm
film. I mean, yeah, you have your lead actors, but you usually have these side characters and they get scenes and they're following. No, 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 no. This is a one man show.
It is.
The ensemble bits. I mean, some of the people that in the trailers they're saying have these parts, they show up for 5 minutes or
Yeah.
less.
Or less.
That's
Yeah.
it. This is just Joaquin, and I think that that's part of the reason why the what he did is so massive, just because to be in character for that amount of time through all of it, like
hmm
start to finish, it's a huge thing to put on your shoulders. And so I kept comparing it to Mr. Robot because of those unreliable narrators, and also just this idea that you're being told one thing, led to believe one thing, and then the director's going to snap his fingers and suddenly it's like, no, 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 you were looking over here when you should have been looking there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so here
Yeah.
we go. Because another one of my favorite scenes, and actually arguably my favorite line, is at the very end.
hmm
And it's, what's so funny? Oh, I was just thinking of a joke. And then she asks if he can tell her the joke, and he says, "You wouldn't get it."
Yeah.
And there's something like this, to go back to my point about why this is a dramedy, and the genius of that is because, and he says it in the movie on the couch right before he kills Robert De Niro's character, is that comedy is subjective.
It is.
People will find some things bizarre. I'm sorry, I'm a horrible human being, but for some reason, when I see somebody else trip over something, I tend to laugh. It's awkward. There's
Yeah.
just something about it,
hmm
and that's his whole point. Like, you guys may not think I'm funny, but I think I am, or one other person will be, or one other person will like me, and what's the harm in that?
Right. Right.
And that the people, and he is right, like he was only invited onto the show and the clip was only shown to make fun
Fun
of.
of him.
Yeah, so there's villainy in that as well.
Yeah.
And so that whole thing, you wouldn't get it.
Yeah.
Like, and then you start thinking like, okay, are they implying that we wouldn't get the movie? Do we really understand what we're seeing? Because something else that's so, one of the reasons why I would want to rewatch that scene is because it's revealed that he's locked up,
hmm
okay?
hmm
And he's talking clearly, and it looks like the same therapist as who was in that
Yeah.
opening scene.
Yeah.
Very similar,
Very
very
similar.
similar staging and everything.
Yeah.
And he just is sitting there, and then they cut to little Bruce Wayne with his parents dead around him, and Gotham is on fire.
hmm
So what is the joke? Is the joke like in his mind that he started this whole movement, or that he in the end actually did defeat Thomas Wayne only to essentially give birth to Bruce Wayne, who ultimately becomes Batman? Like, is
Yeah.
that the joke? Or is the joke that this whole thing is all made up and just something like he's telling his therapist about?
There could be it could be taken in so many ways. I mean, obviously, I mean, when I saw the cut to Thomas and Martha Wayne dead on the ground, I mean, that was like, okay, I thought about the Batman, but also I thought that given how Thomas Wayne was sort of part of this story, where the delusions of grandeur, and how Arthur and his mother, well, his mother in particular, thought that Arthur was Thomas's son, and
Mm-hmm.
and and Thomas was he was portraying himself as this savior of Gotham,
Mm-hmm.
and who was going to run for mayor, who's going to do all these things, but then we actually see the real Thomas Wayne when he encounters Arthur Fleck,
Mm-hmm.
and how it was whenever we got the one percenters in their nice little world, and seeing and then once he was really encountered with people like Arthur, how he treated him. So is that the joke? Is like, yeah, you're supposed to be this paragon of virtue and everything, and Thomas has always been this tragic figure, but actually it's a joke that Thomas is actually just as bad and as awful as Arthur, just rich. I mean,
Well, I think it's just he's mortal. Like,
yeah,
and power is as subjective as
it's
comedy.
comedy. Yeah,
Because really, at the beginning of the film, there's a speech by Thomas Wayne where he calls these radicals a bunch of clowns.
bunch of clowns. Yeah.
Yeah, and ultimately it was a clown that led to his own downfall.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe that's a joke. Maybe it has nothing to do with Bruce, except that now, much like Arthur, he's an orphan.
Yeah, yeah.
And he doesn't know, he has to create this alter ego to really feel, and he's broken, and he has to heal, he has to create this alter ego and ultimately become the savior of Gotham. There's just so much of that. And again, like, we probably just spent 4 minutes dissecting a flicker of an image over a monologue. Like,
yeah.
if we were really sitting down to go scene by scene, we could probably have like a podcast go for 24 hours, because there are so many little things in it.
Yeah, we could.
I mean, it's just there. I love that. I love that it's also open into interpretation, and they're not spoon feeding us any of the answers because they don't want us to get it. I don't think.
I don't think so. And that scene is so, like you said, we could go another hour or so just trying to dissecting that scene and what that meant, as far as what we wouldn't get. I mean, is it? Yeah, I mean, there's the Batman connection clearly, and I think many people will go there, but like you said, I mean, Thomas did, even though it was Murray who dubbed him gave him the moniker the Joker. Thomas was the first one who actually called him, called these people a bunch of clowns, and so there's that piece. There is, as you said before, the unreliable narrator of Arthur. I mean, what is truth and what is fiction, as far as what we were watching? Because as I was watching the film and seeing some of his delusions, I would get lost in them, and then I was sitting there trying to like dissect and figure out now, what is truth and what is fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean, everything about this film is just really does do a phenomenal job of making you think and making you reflect even after you've watched it, and about, again, bigger things than just what was going on in this film. And I think that was really what they were trying to achieve with this, and why it's more than just a run-of-the-mill comic book movie per se.
Right.
It is truly, it truly is art, and
I love art films.
Yeah.
Well, an art film done right. I mean, and like I said, there were some times where I was thinking to myself, Will's gonna be pissed at me because I don't think I like this movie. And I really did think about it. Like last night, my initial reaction is, I don't know. I don't. And the more I think about it, because it stays with you, the more I gravitate to the little details and think, no, 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 no. Just because I felt uncomfortable watching it does not mean that it's a bad film.
No, no, no.
It just means that I have to actually digest what I saw before I can really see the beauty in it.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, it's not an easy film to watch, and I appreciate it for what it is. I would tell someone, if as we are talking right now, it's great filmmaking. It as you said, it will definitely be a film that will be shown in film school 10 years from now as a very in a period where we lament the fact that we don't have a lot of originality in filmmaking these days. This was a truly original film in some of the things that it did, and it will stand it will stand the test of time, as far as like whenever you look back on the early half when filmmakers are looking at films in periods, this one will stand out as far as one of those like films like, oh yeah, this is one of those classics. I feel safe in saying that.
Yeah. Shout out about the score. The score is crazy good and actually very reminiscent of The Dark Knight. And there are a few scenes in this movie, like when the police grab Joker and put him in the car, I immediately flash back to the Dark Knight and him being, I know he sticks his head out and everything and has that dog moment, but there's something just very, because a lot of us, after seeing Dark Knight, like that is the quintessential Joker.
Yeah.
So towards the end of the movie, the more I felt as if I really saw some nuance and or some parallels to that version. And I know that they're different worlds and all of that, but still, if you were to tell me that was the same Joker ultimately that we see down the road, I'm like, yeah, I believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of mystery there. There's it builds a strong foundation for whatever they do. And my biggest prediction was right. This really does make me that much more hyped for the new Batman film.
Yeah.
Like, I want it now.
Yeah.
Because I just got this and it was crazy good. And I can't wait to see how they break down that other character who's ultimately the hero. And there are so many other things to talk about regarding this film because it is that good. Cinematography, Todd Phillips said that he wanted to have it shot like it was homemade because it's a very intimate film. I don't know if they got there, but just visual wise, I love the colors that they did choose.
Yeah.
And I like just how many close-ups they were, and it was unnerving because it was so close to his face, and he's a crazy person, so the closer we are to him, it makes us nervous because we don't know what he's going to do. So I really appreciated that. There was a soundtrack choice that I don't agree with, and it was the last scene where he's dancing down the stairs. And I don't know what that song is. I've heard it 1,000 times.
Yeah, it's the Gary Glitter. He had, I think if I recall, I think he was convicted of child sex offense. But it's a song that
got dark.
Yeah, but there is a reason. I mean, there is some people who had another thing that they were mad about this film was using that particular song because of his criminal history, as far as the artist who composed that song. Yeah.
Do they get mad at any sports game that they attend?
Yeah, well, yeah, but
That
they
song
don't.
is used a lot.
It is. They don't use it as much anymore. Now they use the zombie song, but da 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 da.
I just felt like it didn't really match a lot of the choreography, and also in comparison to all of the other song choices used, it didn't fit. Tone-wise or character-wise. Like, we had a lot of classical music. We had a lot of dread and ambiance. And then, so it just, there was something about it where I was sitting there and I was really hyped for the scene, because that scene is probably in every single trailer.
Yeah.
And like, here's Joker, and then they play that, and I'm like, is this coming from a different theater? Like, what? They chose this song for that?
Yeah. The song is Rock and Roll Part 2, and yeah, I as far as the choice of it, it actually, for me, it actually worked.
Loser.
I'm not a loser.
Okay, Arthur. Okay.
Yeah. It just worked. I mean, it was like, because I guess I do associate it with like sports and just the lunacy of it, and how I could see how Arthur would be thinking of this particular song as he's dancing down the steps, because that's the song people associated, for years with Winners, because it was played in. I mean, I just remember like Laker games and Bulls games and stuff in the 90s and in the early 2000s, where that song was just like, always played with winning teams. So
that's a fair point.
So for me, that was, it plays into that notion that, now I do belong, because, whenever he put the clown makeup on and he was going to Murray's show, he was, at that point, he saw himself no longer as this downtrodden. He was like power. He felt empowered to go on this show and basically, do what he did. And so I thought that was, despite what real world knowledge about Gary Glitter, I thought that was that song did work for me as he was going down the steps.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point that you bring out about how that was played for Winners, and I didn't interpret it like that. I still don't think the choreography matched it.
Yeah, well, I mean,
that what bothers me.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's not supposed to be like, Fred Astaire. I mean,
yeah, but I mean, for all of his practice, he does a lot of practicing. Okay, so it should match the tune, and maybe that's also what it was, that in all of those other moments when he's quote unquote practicing, and we're shown that he has this music side to him. Other songs are playing, or other music is playing, that I don't associate it. So, I mean, it's just a small nitpick. For me, it didn't work for me, but it worked for you, and I'm sure others as well. So that's it. Yeah. We do have only a little bit more to go, and I want to talk about Teen Titans. So I think that's it. I mean, again, we could go on for a few hours about it.
Yeah.
So that's.
Yeah, give us your thoughts as far as what we've talked about, what you think as far as our impressions. We'd love to hear yours.
Yep. And so Titans, Connor finally arrives, and I knew this was going to happen. I knew he was going to save Jason from the fall.
Yeah.
Like, that was just, as soon as it happened, I'm like, oh, and here's Connor, and then they cut to black, and now we're this is classic Titans, they get on track, and then they want to introduce a character, so they stop everything to introduce that character, and then they continue. And now, granted, the first time they did that this season, it was a flashback, and this is all present day. So I get it, and it was kind of cool because of all the Superman tie-ins.
Yeah.
But you direct messaged me something really interesting right before I started watching this episode. And you said that this episode of Titans would really suit to be on the same discussion where we talk about Joker. Why did you send me that DM?
So I watched Titans fresh this afternoon. I didn't get a chance to watch it on Friday. And, clearly Joker was fresh in my mind. And when I sent you that DM, I was in the middle of watching the episode, and it was Connor's trying to find his identity. Mm-hmm. That where we just spent the last 45 minutes or so talking about the Joker's identity and trying to find himself and being an unreliable narrator and stuff. And then with Connor, he's a clone. And whenever you're watching this episode, he's trying to find out about himself. And then when they do go to Cadmus in San Francisco to learn, where she was trying to show him one half of his DNA, his genetic makeup, we learn about Lex Luthor. And then, of course, behind that vault door is all of the 12 previous attempts to create him. So my thought when I sent you that DM was just that this whole story of identity and how how here we have a person who has the genetic makeup of the evil genius of Lex Luthor and the quintessential goody two shoes in Clark Kent.
Yeah, I love that line at the end of it where she says to him, sometimes that anger is yours and sometimes it's his. Mm-hmm. And I was hoping that part of the reason why you sent me that DM is because this episode is so much about identity, much like Joker is, where you have people who are lost, who are detached. They're trying to find their lineage. I mean, Connor wants to know his dad's. At one point, he wants Eve to be his mom because he's trying to find an anchor, something to ground him in this reality, in this situation. I mean, he has Krypto, but Krypto isn't very talkative.
No.
So
it's just a bark here and there. And I think I might have sent you that DM whenever they had that conversation, because it was during that sequence when I was watching it where I was like, I'm glad we're doing this, pairing these two together, because they do have that common linkage as far as the theme for our show tonight.
Yeah, and I mean, even Connor's a clone, and so he has these weird memories as if he was Superman and memories from Lex Luthor, but as just human beings, a lot of us sometimes just inherent our parents' emotional issues or emotional trauma, and that suddenly we have to deal with, and then we also suddenly have our own baggage to deal with. So I really like that, and this is a character study. It's a standstill. It's all about Connor, what brings him here, and this dynamic between Connor trying to figure out who he is and Eve Watson, who ultimately is the co-conspirator, who comes up with the idea that Luthor then takes and applies on how to create Connor, which means that you have to basically merge DNA from both a human and a Kryptonian to stabilize one another.
Yeah.
I really like that. It was a bit slow for me, just because the previous episode, I liked that we had the team together.
Yeah.
I liked that Starfire, Corey was back, and we had this good dynamic between her and Dick. And so it did not to and this was one of my complaints about the first season, to put the brakes on that, to do this story. It's a lot of start, go, stop,
Yeah.
stop, go, stop.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah. So I wish they could figure out a way to do this more seamlessly.
I think this is just the way that this is how. As much I agree with you, but I think I'm learning that okay, this is just basically how this show is going to do with storytelling, and like I don't like it, but 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 on a whole, I still like this. I like the series, but but it is frustrating where we do get these good momentum, and then we spend 3/4 of it, well, 7/8 of an episode about Connor, and then we, with such a cliffhanger ending in the prior episode with what happened with Jason.
Hmm. Yeah, I was thinking about it earlier today. I do like season 2 far and above more than season 1.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have not done this that often. In season 1, every other episode,
Yeah.
we were doing weird things and didn't cohesively work together.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot more cohesion this time around, and I am invested in a lot of relationships. I mean, another thing this episode has going for it, Rachel wasn't around.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that. Love my Rachel-less episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And because we're inundated with Superman, I think it's really fascinating how between Krypton, Supergirl, and now Connor, we're all seeing these different angles
Mm-hmm.
about that character, and we don't even need to see Superman.
Exactly. You
We
don't.
just have, granted, 45 versions of him and Batman are being cast in Crisis on Infinite Earth,
Exactly. Yeah.
which is not infinite. There's only a few episodes, so I don't know how the heck that's gonna play out, but
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
watch it and then you'll hear.
Yep. Yeah, but you're right. We've talked about this before about how all these various iterations of Superman has made the Prime character even more interesting, at least for me, and learning more about the mythology of Superman and Lex Luthor and Krypton and etc. And I liked, one of the things I did like about this episode, it did I like the way they did bring Superman and Lex into the series with the flashbacks to to Smallville and their upbringing. And we learned Lex had the abusive alcoholic father, and of course we all know about how Jonathan Kent was the perfect surrogate father for Kal-El, and in many ways taught him how to be Superman. So, and I think
was cool at the end when Eve tells Connor, "Don't be a hero. Don't use your powers because it will draw attention." Very good homage to the that father-son relationship between Superman and his father.
Definitely. So yeah, so I mean, overall, I agree. There were some parts of the episode that are a little slow, but overall, I actually enjoyed Connor more than I did the episode of Deathstroke in some regards.
I think I might have liked Deathstroke better than Connor. Just because of pace wise, this show is called Titans. It's not called Titan.
Yeah. True. But I mean,
now that I'm like seeing the ensemble, and so it's totally fine to have difference of opinions.
Yeah. Well, I just think the 2 episodes. I mean, overall, the season has been a lot better. But the 2 episodes where they focused on the 2 new one original member, Aqualad, and now Connor, are 2 that definitely stand out for me this season. And to your point, at least Aqualad did have a team element to it, and Connor did not. But they were just really thinking about the first season and how they introduced some of the characters. I felt like they did a better job introducing these two than they did, say, Hawk and Dove.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, there's no debate there. I like how this episode also ends with a cliffhanger because right after Connor saves Jason, of course, he gets struck with Kryptonian bullets. But more importantly, Krypto is taken.
Yes, poor Krypto.
How dare they? Okay, that is an innocent dog.
Yeah, exactly.
Which also, you know what? Maybe I just wish this episode was called Krypto.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, in the fight sequence, he had better moves than Connor.
He did.
He knows how to attack a man. He knows when he should be fed, and he doesn't like it when people do not feed him. And he just like he's a good boy. I don't know.
Somebody
at the end.
Yeah, I think Sarah's gonna find a rescue dog and name it Krypto.
No, I don't trust myself taking care of living things. We all know this. I mean, there's Connor like holding on for dear life, shot up with a bunch of Kryptonian, and then we see Krypto just hanging out in the green leash, and we're like, oh. Not the dog.
Yeah.
Not the dog.
Not the dog. No.
Classic Superman. I mean, that's how Papa Kent died. He went to save the dog from his sister anyway. Not the dog.
Not the dog.
Oh, man. I think on that note, that's it for us tonight. We're just laughing way too much. We're two jokers, apparently.
I guess we are.
Will, why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Yes, you won't get it at Will M. Polk. That's WILLMPOLK.
And you can follow me at SJ Belmont, SJBELMONT. Please follow our crew on Twitter at SNN Nerd. Friend us on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram. But most importantly, rate, subscribe, and comment on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Spotify. Good night, Geek Out. You're welcome.